Would like to call to order the February 6, 2023 Cabarrus County Board of Commissioners work session. Welcome, everyone. You have a copy of the work session agenda before you. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda with the changes on page 3? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. And we move to discussion items for today. First up is discussion of alcohol sales in the unincorporated areas of Cabarrus County. And I think Commissioner Strang had requested that be on the agenda.
Yes, I did. I just wanted to clarify a couple things on that. You know, we've gone about the resolution the correct way. There's a few things I just had a couple of questions on, being that when an individual goes to get an alcohol permit, they assign it to a municipality. So I want to make sure that we are getting our fair shake of the tax revenue, and what do we need to do with that? According to the ABC Commission, I talked to General Counsel, and they said you can merge. You don't have to do it right away, but you can merge with the ABC board to make sure that you're getting the fair share of that tax revenue. I mean, it's going to take us a while for us to see this. I know off the top of my head, Mount Pleasant, just as an example, they get 75% of the tax revenue, we get 25%. But if we see an influx of sales coming from the unincorporated areas of the county, whether it be some of the newer wedding venues, and I have a feeling there's going to be an influx, and I just want us to make sure that we are having a, you know, we have a fair shake in the tax revenue, and that we're being, you know, we're being mindful of that. Because if it all goes into, let's just say, Mount Pleasant, but a majority of it is coming from outside that, you know, that's extra revenue for them, but I also don't want us to miss out on that chance. The only other thing she said was that, you know, just, this is mostly for the viewing public. This is not saying that we're going to open an ABC store within the unincorporated areas. Is just allowing those unincorporated areas, the wedding venues, convenience stores, those types of businesses to be able to go and apply a permit and get, you know, their permit, and they can have their event or sell beer or wine in their stores. That's not a problem. But my biggest question and concern was, I think we need to, going forward, you know, clarify that we're not, you know, if we decide to do an ABC store, that's going to have to be by the election of the public. And going forward, I think we just need to be mindful of the tax revenue potential challenges that we may have. That's really all I wanted to mention.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any questions or comments on that item?
So currently, where is the tax revenue going? Because this resolution.
Currently, in the unincorporated areas, there are no revenues.
However, I thought the resolution that we had passed was effective February 1st.
That is correct, and I'm
So
sure
there
that
could be
nobody has been permitted by this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the plan then? From what she's saying, who will we partner with to make sure that we?
Yeah, that's what we'll need to figure out now, I guess, because what we understood was they would be assigned an ABC store within, inside the city.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, where that purchase is actually made was where the tax revenue was going to, and we would get our typical share.
Right.
So we'll need to investigate to see if there's something different, then we'll do that.
Yeah, they, General Counsel mentioned that we could merge with the city.
You talking about the ABC Commission?
Yeah, the ABC Commission. We could merge, you know, we could be allowed a couple board members to make sure that we're being adequately represented, because we just don't have any representation on the ABC, the local ABC board, to verify. You know, Harrisburg pulls into Concord. Kannapolis also splits revenue with Rowan. They're tied in with Rowan's ABC. So I just want to make sure that anything.
Mount Pleasant's got an ABC.
Right.
So.
And I'm not sure where Midland is. They may be Stanley County or Locust. I'm not really sure.
I don't think Midland has an ABC store.
Yeah, I don't think so, but I mean, you know, they're selling, you know, the gas station at 2427 does sell beer and alcohol, so where does that revenue go? If we start seeing an influx of population from the unincorporated areas, is it gonna go to Stanley County? Is it gonna go to Rowan County if it's somewhere in Kannapolis. So that's my biggest concern with it. I think what we've done as far as the resolution as a whole is fine. I just want to make sure that we get our fair shake and that we do have the option, would have to come to an agreement with the current ABC board here locally to allow us, some representation. Right now, we don't have any.
And of course, when you say the local ABC board, you're talking about 3 local
Three.
ABC boards? Is that correct?
3 that I'm aware of.
Concord, Kannapolis, Mount Pleasant.
You said Harrisburg's part of Concord?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with that, and that, I think it would behoove us to have, representation at the county level, to make sure that we're, going to be well represented. And I'm happy to serve on that if we choose to do so.
Okay, any other comments?
So if someone's permitted, let's say someone gets their permit tomorrow, if they're permitted tomorrow, then where are those revenues going?
There,
For the unincorporated?
right now?
Yeah.
In a 7-Eleven?
Yeah.
It'll go just like everywhere.
Where,
That's not regulated, I don't believe, by the ABC. It's the alcohol, it's the liquor.
Okay.
Part of it.
so, but if someone is permitted for that, then where will that go then?
It will go to where, well, we'll get our share as the county, but
Okay.
it'll go to the ABC commission.
Okay. And so
Well,
what will be
my
our
understand-
share?
Kansas City.
My understanding is that when they issue a permit in Raleigh, they will assign that permit to a particular ABC board,
Okay. Of their choosing?
probably based on where they're located.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think what Commissioner Strang is talking about is some sort of overall type of understanding of how it's going to be handled. And I guess it may depend on how many permits are issued in which area, and then you can figure out where to go. But she's talking about having representation to make sure that the county gets its fair share.
Right.
So on sales other than in an ABC store, there are no specific taxes on those that are distributed locally, other than just regular sales tax? Never thought about it. really.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
we get down.
The way that I see it is that would be no different than any other sale that's made in a municipality. They get their share each month of that. Remember, it's a state sales tax. It's not a local sales tax. It's a
Right.
state sales tax. They get the full 7.25%, and the county, we only get 2% regardless of where it's sold at. And it's a purchase, and so the sales tax applies to it. But I don't see how that alcohol could be separated, and then not only that, how could the vendor separate, well, you're buying beer or liquor or whatever, and what county do you live, where do you live? Do you live Mount Pleasant? Do you live in Midland? That's not gonna happen. It's 7%, a state sales tax, and 2% goes to the county. That's all there is to it. No need to make any more out of it than that.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, then we will move to item 4.2, which are appointments to boards and committees. You all have a copy of those before you. Excuse me, I skipped to the wrong place. I've been making marks on my page here. Our next item is infrastructure and asset management, emergency equipment warehouse. Update, Kyle Billiford.
Michael Miller is going to handle this update on this facility.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to give you an update on the construction project progress of the emergency equipment warehouse and the ITS building. I got some pictures up there, but first I'll kind of go through last 30 days of progress and then next 30-day outlook. So obviously weather's a big impact over the last month or so. On the ITS portion of the building, the gas line rough end is complete and it's been run to the building. On the warehouse portion of the building, all the sprinkler lines are completed, and the plumbing rough end has been completed, and overhead doors have been started, so for the site, the sanitary sewer line connection has been made. And then for the next 30 days, on the ITS portion of the building, the roofing will start. It's a flat roof. On the warehouse portion, the overhead doors will be complete. As I said, with the site, the grading work is kind of struggling right now because of the weather. Combined with a very small site, we've got a couple stormwater ponds on site that sort of constrict what all can go on around there. And there's a lot of different pieces of equipment running around right now, so it's a real tight site. Any questions on that so far? Okay. I can kind of describe some of these pictures. This right here is the ITS portion of the building. That's the Ramden Court side of the building. This is the same portion of the building. It's just looking from Cabarrus Avenue. So that's the front entrance right there. This is a drone picture that Lyles Construction took of the entire site. That's Ramden Court there on the right side between the Infrastructure and Asset Management Ops Center and the new building, Cabarrus Avenue along the top side. You can see the stormwater pond there at the bottom of the picture and up on the left-hand side too. Same thing, it's just aerial looking from the Cabarrus Avenue point of view. That's the ITS portion of the building along the front, going left to right, and then north to south is the warehouse portion of the building. Another shot of the front entrance there. You can see all the exterior sheathings on. Still waiting on windows, so we're not quite dried in there yet. And those are the roll-up doors going in on the warehouse side of the building. It's another shot of the ITS portion. This is actually inside the IT area. You can see they've started some interior framing there. Same thing there. More framing. This is the warehouse. You can see the sprinkler lines have been installed there. We're pretty much all dried in on the warehouse. So, any questions?
What's the estimated date of completion?
We're still looking at September.
If we get pushed back anymore with weather, it's going to slip to October. A tight site didn't allow for us to do any laydown in the area. We're having to do the laydown in the parking in the street, and every time you make any type of turn out there, you create more mud than existed there when you got there. It's been very challenging for them.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll just keep going with the Franklin Park Barn project.
Sure. And I'll do the same thing. I'll go through the last 30 days of milestone, the next 30 days. They finished the rough end of the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. We've installed all the standing seam metal roofing, and the stormwater and gutter drain piping has started, mostly the stuff that's in the ground, not so much the connections from the building. And they've started the painting and staining. There is the curtain wall or the storefront frames are all in, but there's not physically glass in them yet. And that will actually is one of the milestones for the next 30 days is to get that and get that dried in. The biggest change, only because most of you are walking it this week, and it's actually probably a bad week to walk it with what they're doing, but they're putting in all the acoustical matting under the wooden floors upstairs. So that's kind of what we'll see when we go in there. So what you're seeing is a lot of the behind the wall acoustical treatments is basically what I could say to help with the acoustics of that building, which is what it did not have when it was the former barn. And then obviously they'll start to finish the site work stuff outside so that they can start on the amenities, which is the volleyball court, the playground curbing, and the sidewalks to connect the existing playground that was there and that we kind of preserved. It'll take on a little bit of a different shape in terms of the island or the kidney that it looks like, and we'll basically bleed that into in terms of a ADA travel way to the rest of the barn. And we can go through the pictures if you want. That shows your exterior, it's your batten board, and kind of shows you what the door look will be like. Obviously, not that easy to try to come up with ad hoc stuff that makes it look like a barn. So there was a lot of actual active living and parks and infrastructure and asset management and design team into what we could make the doors look like and what the type of hardware on the doors will look like, and you'll kind of see that as we start to go through them. And in your tours this week. That just shows the first bit of staining. Obviously, we did the portion that was done the most, but that'll show you the color of the interior, so you're having to match that throughout the facility. Just a couple of shots back, so that shows you that your storefront entry, that, hey, look at me, this is where you enter and come into the common space, which is obviously not what the barn had before. If you're familiar, it had the true sliding cattle doors down at the bottom. And you can scroll down. Shows an unstained door, but that's kind of the exterior look that you're going for as you walk up to it. And that's the shot, so that would be facing the playground. So that's your, excuse me, that's your second floor assembly space that you could actually sit in and look out onto that. So you can see there's no glass in there, and there won't be when we walk this week either. So dress accordingly, I guess. Shows your lower area. That's where you come into basically your common area and where the elevator and the bathrooms will be. Shows all your mechanical and your different MEP trade tie-ins. It's all roughed in already. And that kind of shows you a look of your rentable space on the second floor, where it does have that true barn. If you all remember the second floor of the former barn, of really how that interior looked, short of it didn't have that type of ductwork. And we use that exposed ductwork to enhance that aesthetic and also for cost. Kind of shows it from a different view, and there'll be our ITS department. We're working with our ITS department really closely, like we do on all of our projects, so that's where a lot of your feeds of all your data will go behind when those panels go in, so you won't even see them. And that's obviously something else that the former barn didn't have. That shows you your overhang. It's a little bit different than what the previous barn looked like. So again, that's your main entrance coming, if you were coming from the Harmony in the Park kind of area, and that shows you your overhang right there. And then just taking a couple steps back, taking some pictures of all of it, so you can kind of see the scope and scale of it. And the same thing. And we are, in terms of schedule, we are pushing to be able to be open on June 19th, which is when the day camps would start out there. And our major holdup at this point is the elevator. Any questions?
Is that elevator your typical supply chain issues that you're experiencing with a lot of other things, or is something unique about it?
Depends which day you ask them.
Do what?
Depends which day you ask the manufacturer. Yes, I would say materials and, bless you, materials and backup of jobs, and the fact that elevators are, you've got three major players in the area, maybe 4 or 5 if you kind of push it. But yes, it's an extremely small elevator, so it is not the normal 25 or 3,500 pound cab that you ride on, that you just rode up when you came up here. It is a very specialized elevator, not to say that not all of them are built like that. So when you buy an elevator, there's not just one back on the shelf. They literally put them all together and assemble them. But this one, because of how small it is much different. And they will not put it in writing to be able to get it to us by the day we need it. And you can't pass any type of CO for that facility without it. So yes, that is the challenge.
Other questions for Kyle?
What is roughly, and compared to the old barn that was there, how much larger is this barn?
The footprint isn't, meaning what the ground it sits on is not much bigger. Minimal, to be honest with you. It'll probably seem a little bit different because it'll be true hardscape around it. So if you recall going up there, it was sidewalks that latticed it with like kind of pea gravel, and that would kind of get kicked everywhere. You're going much more with a hardscape, so you're not slipping or rolling your ankle or tripping or anything like that. But the footprint is not much bigger. Where it increased was building code. to be able, you can't build a restrooms like, I'm not sure if you've ever been in the restrooms there, but you can't build something like that. That's not legal. And then every time you have to turn around a picnic table, you have to have more space than you used to have. And that just shows the building code. It was renovated in 85 or upfitted in 1985. It just shows you the difference. In terms of the rentable spaces, which is where I think you might be driving, you're really looking at what you gained was footprint on those outside sheds. Specifically, when we came back several years ago and built an exterior restroom on one of those sheds, and we did that because we had so many patrons and you were basically walking in to somebody's birthday party or something like that. We built some on the outside because, like you hear, and if you listen to the podcast that went out today, the barn is the focal point. Well, everybody would just run right in and use those bathrooms. So we put them on the exterior, and when we did that, we ate up a lot of that rentable space for that. So we get some of that back.
It looks nice. It looks like the second floor would be bigger than the previous, but maybe it just appears that way in the pictures. But I remember the old barn, the second floor seemed closed in and.
I think that's light.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you because if you can imagine what you're looking at, that storefront right there, that's not rentable space, that's open air.
Okay.
So think about the former one and how big, you went up that tiny little stairwell.
Right.
And the whole thing was a rentable space. But remember, it had that jog in it for where the kitchenette was. So you didn't always see a lot of people sitting back in that back corner. That's like where the table was with the food on, you know? I think it's going to seem a lot more open in terms of the light that comes in, but in square footage, no, we're not netting anything that's that much larger because you've now had to put restrooms and that open area up there. Elevators and restrooms, those building code, they really kill you on footprint.
It looks good.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we move now to discussion items for action. First up, from the Sheriff's Office, acceptance of grant funds to support additional officers. We have Sheriff Shaw and a whole cadre of people joining him as well. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With me is Amy Louder with the Cabarrus County School Administration, and this is Lieutenant Barrett Elwood, who is over all of our school resource officers for the Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office. And so we are here seeking acceptance of a grant that was given to the Cabarrus County Schools. So I thought it was most appropriate to let Amy kind of go over that whole process, what was involved in it, those types of things first.
Hi, welcome. Thank you. So the Center for Safer Schools is part of the Department of Public Instruction in Raleigh, and they have been able to provide a grant for safety, school safety. It includes our SRO funding for a partial match. It includes safety equipment, training, and then supports for students in crisis. This particular year, the focus of the grant was on elementary and middle schools, and we've been able to provide, I think, 27 SROs is the count for Cabarrus County, and I'd like to be able to say Cabarrus County Schools is forever grateful for all the support of Cabarrus County and being able to fund supports to keep our students and staff safe, so thank you very much. The grant covers the funding for the SROs, and in this particular year's grant, we were looking at the needs of our schools, and we have 2 larger middle schools that the county is responsible for, and we asked for additional SROs for those 2 sites, and the grant was awarded. So we've gotten those 2 positions for the partial funding that the grant provides, and I think the sheriff will talk about some of the additional needs based on that.
So obviously, we had several meetings as to this, and Harris Road Middle is the one we're talking about, as well as Hickory Ridge Middle are the 2 largest middle schools in the county. And this would put an additional school resource officer there. It also works out well that those 2 middle schools are located fairly adjacent to other schools. So it would not necessarily restrict that SRO to always be at that middle school, but could respond to the other while still providing services or protection, if you will, security at that particular middle school. And obviously, we have emergencies that come up, sickness, court, those types of things, and where we try to juggle as many people as we can and pull in auxiliary SROs, it would be advantageous, obviously, to have that second SRO within the school. And we've talked about this, as schools get larger and larger, and, you know, you're dealing with schools with 1,200, 1,400, 1,600 students, what is the expectation out of one SRO? I mean, and we also recognize in our discussions the need at that middle school level to begin to develop relationships, strong relationships between law enforcement and students. Because a lot of times by the time they reach high school, if we haven't accomplished that, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So this is a critical area as far as middle schools are concerned. And so in our discussions, we are interested in moving forward in conjunction with the school system on this grant. We would be looking at trying to introduce these and start it by the beginning of the next school year is what we would be doing. But obviously, they got the grant acceptance or grant award, and we felt like we needed to bring it and talk with y'all now about it, although it wouldn't be implemented till obviously after July 1.
So is there an end date to the funding? Is it for how many years?
So the particular grant, it goes by a year, so it ends July 1st of 2023. However, as long as we are able to submit the reports and do the documentation properly, they'll continue that grant for another year, as it's written.
And on that note, with the approval of this item, we would have to build in the ongoing expense into the fiscal '24 budget. I believe it's a 1/3 state funded and 2/3 local funded, and so we would have to come up with that money as part of the next budget year.
So it would be 2/3 local funded after the grant expires, or
If the grant were to expire, it would be 100% county.
it would be 100%? So as it stands right now, it's 2/3 local.
Correct.
Questions, commissioners?
Yes, I was just looking over this, and I looked over the weekend. How much was this grant for, Sheriff? How much was what was the total amount of the grant? Because I seen one figure, 300 and some thousand, I thought, then I see another one here, 1.1 million.
So Cabarrus County Schools was awarded right at $2.1 million for the entire grant, and that covers SROs, the safety equipment, students in crisis, the supports there, and then also professional development. The part that's just reserved for SROs is about 1.7 million.
Okay, and that's the part that we'll be paying 2/3 of that, is that correct? That's the match?
Rodney, I think you can probably address that best.
So we get a specific amount from the school system. Historically, for the last 3 years, that's been about $38,000 per SRO. And that's what they get from DPI that goes towards the SROs that we have. The actual DPI allotment rate is $58,000. So we anticipate an increase in revenue as we move into the new fiscal year. This is a recent issue that the school system has identified. So to your point, it's the difference between what we get from the school system. So for the current year, we're getting $38,000, and then the actual cost for those SROs, which usually are priced $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 apiece. So I'd have to do the math to get you an exact number.
Now, I'd be interested to see what our share of that is, although,
Yeah.
we love free money. We like to see those grants come in. But then obviously, when you got one as huge as this is, I would like to know what our portion's gonna be of this grant. And, now, when you're saying the SROs, you're talking about all 27 of them? All 27, 78,000, 75,000 for all 27? I just didn't have all the information I needed, Rodney, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can get that to you.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be helpful. And safety equipment, I just have a question. Is that, because, is that their vehicles and that type of things?
No, the safety equipment is specifically for schools to use, such as window tinting to put film on the windows to darken it so outsiders can't see in, for safety equipment like metal detectors and things like that. It's not to the SROs.
I think it's a great idea. The father of 5, 4 of them that are still in public schools, I don't know how you put a number on safety. I am 100% supportive of this. I have kids that go there every single day, Monday through Friday, and I know that we could always use more. When you see the videos that come out of these schools, it's hard to say no to something like an extra SRO officer. So I'm glad you guys went for it. I'm glad you got it, and I 100% support it.
And I would just say that this is dealing in very rough numbers. Let's say it is $86,000 a year for an SRO. There's some variations depending on their current salary, those types of things. You know, for this first year, if we're receiving $36,000 and it's $86,000, the outlay for 2 positions is going to be $100,000. That's just, would you not say that's fair, Rodney? So we're not talking about the entire, that's already budgeted and grant funded. This would be an additional, what would be, excuse me, for that first year, 100, and we have been, and I've been in meetings where we now should, that number should go up to 58,000. So you can see in the follow-on year, it would again drop to say $60,000 as opposed to 100,000. And that's rough math, just on my part, but just to be clear, that's just for those 2 positions would be what is different from continuation budget going into this budget year.
Just to complicate it further, so the additional revenues that we anticipate for next year. So we expect to see an additional revenue to fund exactly what we have today, of in the neighborhood of 500,000, maybe a little bit more. So that is more than enough to offset the $100,000 increase for these 2 positions. It's still basically going to be a net positive on a revenue side as we move in to make this correction that we've identified. So, positive news.
That's great. Thanks for the clarity, Sheriff and Rodney, also, because when you're dealing in huge numbers, but 100,000, when you got a $300 million budget, it's not a lot of money. But I still would have wanted to know, and you clarified it for those 2. Hey, no problem.
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, just for public's benefit, I think that Cabarrus County Schools, as far as the amount of school resource officers that we have currently, exceeds most systems in the state. And that's something we should tell people about and brag about as often as we can, because I agree, it is a very, very valuable and needed service, and we appreciate the job you do for our kids.
Thank you. And my counterpart at the Center for Safer Schools often tells me that they hold Cabarrus County up as the example across North Carolina as to where they'd like every county to get to eventually. Because of that, we've been asked to participate in programs like the State Fusion Center, and being a contributing county to the State Fusion Center to quicker deal with threats to the school system. So our information is sent to them, it's vetted, they're receiving information, vetting it, and sending it back to us. So we're not chasing our tail when a threat's been sent from overseas. You know, we're not chasing down something that looks like it may have originated in Cabarrus County, when in fact it originated either out of our country or in, say, California, which, believe it or not, that happens quite frequently.
Yeah.
And that's what Lieutenant Elwood deals with on a daily basis, working in conjunction with Amy Lauder. And not only that, our threat assessment system that we have in place, where we're looking at every potential threat that we have, evaluating it, and looking to see what we can do either from a behavioral standpoint or a response standpoint, those types of things.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. Okay, we're going to make a little departure on our agenda, not as big as I did a while ago when I jumped all the way down the page. But I think our folks from the CVB who are currently at item 4.7, we're going to let them go next. They have some other commitments. Welcome all.
Thank you. And this is our first time appearing for the new commissioner, so glad to be here. First, I want to always start by reminding everyone that the Convention and Visitors Bureau, we are funded by occupancy tax, and those are dollars that are typically paid by a visitor who stays in our hotel properties and Airbnbs. I have to add that on now because we do receive revenue from Airbnbs. So these are visitor tax dollars. And also, would like to remind everyone that we are legislated by the state of North Carolina, that these dollars, tax dollars, have to be spent on tourism-related expenditures. So everything we do, we look at it from a tourism aspect. But excited to bring a project to you all this evening or this afternoon. We have been looking, we're destination marketers. That's what a DMO is, and that's what we're referred to as. But we're also destination managers. And we are always looking for new opportunities, win-win opportunities, that we can contribute to our local community and also create new facilities for our sales team to be able to sell. And one of those that we have come across, and our board actually voted on this to move forward, which is why we are here this evening, is to put a Mondo track. Does anybody know what a Mondo track is? This is a Mondo track. We brought the Mondo track to you. Well, a little piece of it. So I'll pass this around so you can touch it and feel it. And we would like to put this Mondo track facility at J.M. Robinson High School. Now, why J.M. Robinson? Why not Concord High School? Well, this is the same kind of issue that we had, and it's not an issue, but we had to deliberate on which of the schools are the closest to the hotel properties in which this would be meets and not, tournaments. But which of those high schools is the closest to our hotel properties that the attendees would be staying at and make it most convenient, which makes it more sellable for our team to be able to sell. And then in the next step, when we looked at that, those are the three high schools that are closest to the hotels are Cox Mill, West Cabarrus, and J.M. Robinson. Now, we would not want to tear up West Cabarrus's brand-new track. So we looked at those high schools, and one of the three of those high schools that has the worst track is J.M. Robinson. It is in very bad shape. So that was the second reason we chose J.M. Robinson. The third was, from an event standpoint, the layout of the parking lot and the facility itself is very much preferred by event rights holders. They like the layout at J.M. Robinson. There's plenty of room to park, to get in and out. There's several access points to get in and out of that parking lot, so it makes it much more convenient. So that is what we're here for. Our board actually voted to pay for this entire project with some monies. Tourism is doing very well after COVID. I am happy to say we are breaking records. People are traveling, and they are traveling to Cabarrus County. I know a lot of people have a hard time with that, but they really are, and it's amazing, and we are so very happy to say that we are now exceeded what we were prior to COVID. So honestly say we're back. Where was I going with that? Yeah, okay, we're back. Next slide. So, why a Mondo surface? And I am going to let John Poole, he works with Geoservices. Oh, I know what I was telling you. That our board actually voted for us to pay for this, and an up to $1.5 million project is what this is going to be, and we would cover the cost of that. Now, he's going to tell you why a Mondo surface.
Lots of facts up there in regards to the specifications of the track and what it offers and that side of things. And you also felt a piece of the Mondo track here. But the reality part of this is a sought-after track to compete on. And obviously we want to bring there. There is a need for it. There are there's a total of 8 tracks in the state. 2 are indoors and 6 are outdoors. And the outdoor ones are old. And right now, with talking to potential customers, there's an excitement in the air about Cabarrus County getting a Mondo track. So that's pretty cool in that sense. It is a win-win situation. Sort of everybody wins. The destination wins, the students win, and obviously the schools win in respect to bringing this kind of track to the destination. When you really think about it, the students are the big winners. They get to run, practice, and compete on a Mondo track. And this is a Mondo track, and apparently you can run really fast on it. I haven't tried it yet, but I will. I mean, the reality part of this is it's like a springboard, and it absorbs shock, and it reduces the risk of injury, is what I'm hearing. And the lifespan on this is 20 years. So you've got a long time to take some opportunities with this. Now, let me take you back to the turf fields. Obviously, we've been working with the schools on that for a number of years. A little shutdown at COVID, obviously, with respect to that. But to date, we've done 12 events on those fields for 3,791 room nights. And if you equate that at even a rate of $150 a night, that's well over $500,000 in regards to rooms revenue coming into the destination. But when you look at it from a economic impact point of view, it's millions. It's like millions of dollars in regards to what they drop in the destination. So that's really what it comes down to. That way, you'll see a Mondo track on the left, and this is obviously it's just sort of indicative of what you'll see at J.M. Robinson. You'll see two long chutes, they call them, on the left-hand side, and that's where the starting blocks are for the 100 and 200, the hurdles and things like that. And they have them on both sides because of wind direction. And then you'll see to the left of the football field another long chute there, and that's where the pits are for the jumping. And then the D formation is at the bottom under the Bulldogs area there, and that's where the high jump pits are and the pole vault pits are. It is an 8-lane track, and you can obviously customize the colors to the school colors, and we would probably do that with regards to that. Now, really, this is all about economic impact for us. The reality is, sorry.
Okay.
I looked at 6 events after talking to some track and field people here, and these are events that we can easily get. And I was amazed at the number of athletes and the number of spectators coming to these things. And I put a guesstimation in regards to the room nights that come in with these events. And you look at those 6, the economic impact is $2.1 million from these 6 events. And I will tell you, as you'll see on the bottom, the opportunities that we have. I mean, New Balance Nationals, the Special Olympics, the State Games, Conference USA, Early Bird Invitationals, and then we're talking to the colleges, Catawba College, Queens College, and the Charlotte 49ers, all expressed interest in this track already.
Is that it? Is that what you got? All right, and you will see attached, I think we did not provide this. Okay, we brought the actual quote with us too, so that if you wanted to see that, you're welcome to see that too. And that is the project, if you have any questions.
I think it's a great project. I think it's fantastic. What's the time frame to have this installed? When do you anticipate, is this like summertime type of project and it gets done during summer, or
Well, I
it can be done?
talked with Brian Tyson at the school, and he said, we would have to work with them, and they have obviously worked with Geosurfaces already through the turf field projects. It will take about 3 months, 3 to 4 months to install this track, which is actually very quick turnaround. So we would work with the school when they don't have any athletics on the track, and I don't know the answer to which month that is that they would be able to begin.
Okay.
I assume that the school system is, in favor of this.
But we are on our way there
Okay.
as soon
I
as
was
we
gonna-
leave here.
I was going to ask if they had
yes.
voted on this.
No, they will hopefully vote this afternoon when we get there, I think at 6 o'clock. So,
Right.
That's why we
Okay.
moved it
Bump
Yeah.
I understand. And now the quote you have, you said that your board has voted to pay up to 1.5, but I'm assuming this project is going to be.
It is exactly $1,439,860.
Perfect.
Donna, are the events weekly, during the weekdays or weekends or both?
They're typically weekend.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one of the purposes for us being here is we would utilize the county to process the transaction, to handle the contracting, and then we would funnel the money to the finance department to make the payments.
I think at one point in time, the school system had stated that they did not have a track that met the requirements to host regional track meets. I'm assuming this would correct that problem,
Yes,
right?
you can host Olympic events,
Yeah.
pre-Olympic events. Well, of course, we're not going to be able to host an Olympic event, but a pre-Olympic event. And also, Special Olympics I'm super excited to be able to say that we could host Special Olympics because this type of turf or track you can put blades on it. You can run the wheelchairs on it, any kind of cleats. They won't have to cover it up when the football players walk across it. It'll be just fine. It kind of repairs itself. And it's able to, if at the start-finish line, the cleats dig in and it wears right there more quickly, they can cut that out and replace that in there and it bonds back together somehow. So I don't know the specifics on how it does that, but that's what we've been told.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. Good luck at your next stop.
Are they gonna vote? No, we're good? Okay, thank
Okay.
you. We appreciate your time.
Okay, next up is, now we're back to appointments to boards and committees. We have a rather long list this week, and y'all have all received them in advance. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of those? Okay, hearing none, we will move to item 4.3, which is resolution amending the Board of Commissioners 2023 meeting schedule, and I think this merely adds our retreat on February 24th. Any comments about that? Okay, then, you've got motion out here. Do we need to vote on that tonight? Yes, please. Lauren? Okay. Okay, so I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules so we can take action on this tonight. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes, and I would now entertain a motion to approve the resolution amending the Board of Commissioners 2023 meeting schedule. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes. Thank you. So we move now to item 4.4, budget amendment to appropriate board contingency fund. And I think Rosh is going to speak.
I was going to save Rosh the walk. This should be
Okay.
relatively brief. So this item will appropriate or transfer $439,228 from the board's contingency to our legal fees account to cover expenses and anticipated expenses through the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Any questions on that one? All right, thank you, sir.
Steve, just a quick question. Is there a way, Rodney, you can provide us a breakdown, of what's expected going forward and what's excess of what we've already used thus far? I mean, I know I asked you before for budget, but if there's a breakdown that you could provide us, just so we can see where that is.
You want individual cases or just?
Yeah, that's fine.
Whether it's, okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's helpful.
Okay, anything else? Okay, next item, 4.5, Rob Wallace Park, timing of Phase 2B. And I think Rodney and Kyle are going to join forces on that one.
So Kyle will have more specifics, but I can start with sort of the background and the reason this is before you. So we received a request in early January to have an expanded Midland fireworks event. And we had some concerns related to the timing of Phase 2B and the impact that that would have on the fireworks event. And our challenge was the potential for cost increases if we delay the project timing. And when we have any time that we see a potential cost increase, we want the board to be aware of that and the board to sign off on that. And so that's the reason it's before you today, to see if you are willing to delay the project and to accept that risk of potential cost increases, to allow them to have this event, and then the project could start after July 4th. Anything you want to add?
No, I can give scope of the project and timing of it if the board wishes. Okay, so scope of the project is Phase 2B, so it's an extension of a water line and electric that ended at Phase 2A, which is kind of where the bluff starts, if you will, which will be the area that looks out on the big field or the area that they're going to be shooting their fireworks from, but that doesn't have a bearing on it. 23 parking spaces, a playground, a large shelter that will have a restroom in it. It'll be actually our first shelter that has restrooms in it. Typically, you see them connected to our parks office buildings or nature buildings. This is actually a standalone shelter that have a restroom because there's nothing else down in that area of the park. And then as two alternates, there will be two small shelters flanking or on the sides of the large shelter. And to give you an idea, rather than just giving you square footages, basically the large shelter will hold 9 tables and the small shelters would handle 6, and those will be bid as alternates. And then it's connected with a lattice of concrete sidewalks and some picnic benches.
What about the history of this project? Where has it been and where are we going? I guess is the easiest way. How many different phases?
Well, Phase 2 was only supposed to be 1 phase, but it ended up being 2 to try to get to it. So the Phase 2A was the extension of the utilities, specifically not really for this project, but for what is going to be the building on the bluff, which right now in the master plan and in the CIP is listed as Phase 3. And that is the large building and some of the amenities that were listed there in master plan only were a small splash pad and a playground and then one other shelter. And that overlooks that large field that's there. So it was the extension of those lines to that area as well as what's known as the parking lot in that side of we called it the Phase 2A parking lot. I don't really know what you would call it, but it's the only parking lot over there. And then obviously the trails that come along that. So that was supposed to be bid last summer, and we waited 8.5 months for the state to get us a stormwater permit. Which, if you know anything about the size and acreage of Rob Wallace Park and the amount of pervious versus impervious, you could shake your head at that.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if we go ahead and move forward and approve this delay, there's a very good possibility that next year, at the next phase, there's going to be an actual building where they're wanting to park, and it might not be possible to actually approve that next year.
I don't think Phase 3 starts that rapidly. I think we begin planning next year, but yes, if we're looking at this aerial right here, I will tell you Phase 3 and the amenities that come along with it, parking lot, shelters, playgrounds, they sit on where that red line is and close to those blue X's. Yeah, so that's the overlook of the bluff. Now, again, that's master planned out, but that's why we extended the utilities there. So yes, if your question is, will Phase 3 affect them? The answer is yes. I think also, you're also asking if Phase 2B will affect them. So Phase 2B, the one that we're talking about bidding, encompasses the green, looks like a dog's head from this angle, but that will be the construction area. And that's obviously why we would delay it. The question is, next year, can they use it as a seating area? And my answer would be, I don't know why you couldn't put your chairs on sidewalks and on playgrounds. And intermixed, obviously you can't put it in the shelter because you can't look through the shelter, but I wouldn't see why they can't use fold-out chairs. Now, I don't know if they wouldn't want to inhabit that area, but yes, they can. That stage might be a little, we'd have to really look at the logistics, but I think you could squeeze all of that in and not have an impact other than it wouldn't just be an open field, but it won't stop you from sitting there and watching.
And, is there a way to quantify if expenses will rise, or based off of your, you deal with building all the time, in your
Yep.
view, if we hold this project up, is there a chance that it could cost us more money?
So when the town suggested this, my first response was, I just need approval to delay. And the response we got back was, well, bid now, but add verbiage in there to delay and then quantify that amount. And what I'm going to tell you is so this is about, just over $1 million project. And a lot of it's civil work. So take out elevators, take out the word microprocessor, which apparently is in every single piece of equipment that you have to buy these days. Take out that kind of HVAC and MEP components, and I don't think that you get the delays or the escalations in that. I think what you would see is it's all about timing. There's only certain companies that do this type of civil work, okay? You're not building a road, you're not building a bridge, it's not a 5-year project, it's one of these ones that they fit in when they can, because a lot of these groups that we would hire, quite frankly, a lot of them that would do this are gonna sub out the shelter component. They're gonna be civil workers. They're gonna be ones that probably build bridges and build roads for DOT, and they're fitting this in. I think what you would see, and this was my original response to the town, was I don't think they're gonna be able to quantify and break down the escalation starting tomorrow versus starting July 5th or 2nd, I can't remember the day of their event. I don't think they're gonna be able to quantify that. I think they'll put a dollar on it, but I don't think you're gonna be able to break it down and quantify it. And I'm not sure how to try to go through that bidding. I've talked to the design team, and they were like, yeah, I don't think you're gonna yield the result that you wanna see in terms of that dollar. I also not sure I want to open the door to have a discussion about escalation with anybody. Like, oh, yeah, build this in so that, we can track it. I wouldn't think that would be our best option. So my initial response was, we can delay if I'm given board direction on that.
Well, I do want to say, I've been on the receiving end of all those emails. I know you have a lot on your plate. I've seen all the words in those emails. Thank you for how hard you work. I know you already had a lot on your plate, and you made time for this tonight to have that information. So thank you from me for taking that on.
Yes, sir.
I'll just say that I'm in full support of delaying this until, it's going to be a very short amount of time that we're actually delaying going out to bid. So I'm in full support of delaying the starting of construction until after their event. I've talked to a number of officials in Midland, some of the residents, citizens of that area, and it actually brings in thousands of people to the area, and they really want to see this happen this year. Now, I know they may have to plan for a future year. Next year there may not be a problem with the spectator area, but there may be something that they have to plan for in the future. But I think for this go round, if we're only delaying a couple of months, I can't imagine that the costs are going to escalate that much. And I think that Independence Day is an important day to celebrate. I think we should be proud of that. I think that we should support that, and I think this board should decide to delay bids until you see fit.
I'll echo that as well. I do have a question. The request for the stage and food trucks, I'm just trying to make sure I'm following this map. The little blue, like you called it, Doghead, is that where they're wanting to put the amphitheater and in the green area and the food trucks?
Okay.
Just so I'm reading this right.
I should have brought a pointer for this. The green dog head.
You can go up.
Yeah.
So you gotta hold the microphone.
The yellow dots that you see
Yeah.
are the food trucks. The yellow line is the stage, or the green line is the stage.
Okay.
The blue check marks up there are overflow parking.
Okay. Okay, that's why I was just trying to follow where that was. Okay. I'm in favor of pushing this back, delaying this a little bit. From my understanding, and Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't even gone out to bid yet. Is that correct?
We have not. That's why I'm here to
Okay.
get permission to delay that bid.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
And as I mentioned, the town supports this. They want to make certain that this celebration happens. Now, if it's a situation where they didn't want this, and and then we were going, against what they wanted, but this is their wishes, and for us just to delay a couple of months, I don't see a problem.
I walked in here with every intention of making the motion to delay. The town deserves it. The people deserve it. However, I do want to bring up one point. In 2014, you defunded that park in June, and I have the notes from the meeting. It says, terminate and allocate all funding for Wallace Park. $1.8 million has been appropriated to build a new park at the Cabarrus Union County line. With almost $500 million in debt and hundreds of millions of dollars of additional debt potentially in the county's future, it is irresponsible to fund a new park. Not only did you vote for that, but you seconded it. You seconded the motion to do it. And I'm not done.
That's fine.
I'm not done.
Continue.
For you to sit here and grandstand to be for the town of Midland is absolutely ridiculous, because you did defund it. And I would like to point out the fact that Steve Morris is the one who actually put it back in to fund that park. So if after 9 years you would like to give the town of Midland an apology, we can look at the camera and you can owe them an apology for 9 years of defunding their park. You can probably also thank Steve Morris, or else we wouldn't be having this conversation about the fireworks. So I am coming here to vote that we push this off and allow them to have it. But for you to sit here and say this when in 2014 you did something completely opposite. I've seen on Facebook where you yourself have posted, and I quote, his voting history is explained by following the money. You put that. Your voting history is right here in the minutes from 2014. So I just want to put that on record for everybody that shows up to these meetings every month and bashes Steve Morris. He was the one that actually refunded that. So thank you, Steve. I greatly appreciate it, because without you, we wouldn't be having this conversation over fireworks right now.
Well, those words that you read are not my words, and you were not involved in 2014, but I will say that at that time, we didn't even have budgeted staff for that expansion. We did not have that in the budget. So at the time, the decision was decided that we should fund the park whenever we have appropriate staff to staff it. It wouldn't make sense to go out and build the park and not have staff for it. So there is a lot more behind it than just Chris defunded a park. That is absolutely false. That is absolutely not correct. As I said, we're not going to put the cart before the horse. And as far as, a Facebook post, we're not going to get into that here or there, but it's in black and white. It's public record of, how you were bought and paid for. Simple as that.
Did you vote to defund the money from the Midland Park? Yes or no?
As I said, it's not as simple as you cannot put the cart before the horse. If you do not have the staff to staff a park, you cannot go out and build it without the staff to have it. So we were delaying it for a period of time until it was all budgeted.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this item? If not, I think that is included in our consent agenda to go forward. So we will move now to item 4.6, Rock Hill Church Road, Union Cemetery Road realignment easement settlement. And
Can I, real quick?
Yes.
So on the last item, we did not include it as part of the consent agenda. We were just seeking consensus from the board. So it
Okay.
sounds like we do have at least a majority that is in favor of delaying, and so we will communicate that back to the
That is
town.
my read as well.
Yeah, I sensed,
So-
there was a sense of urgency from the town from
Yeah.
getting this answer, so I'd actually like to probably email them now. to
So
tell
we will
them
let them
something.
know.
And I
we-
think that item is listed on our consent agenda, so
Okay.
we might need to adjust that.
Yeah.
Should we suspend the rules and vote on it, just so that it helps him moving forward, just because time is an urgency?
I will take the consensus of the board, or you can suspend. What you're doing is you're allowing me to delay to allow the event to take place without any intrusion of construction. So I have no issue with that.
Consensus is sufficient
Okay.
to proceed. Okay, any other questions or comments on that item?
Thank you.
Then, thank you.
Thank you.
And Kelly comes with the next item.
Thank you. So we were approached by the Department of Transportation in regard to the realignment of Union Cemetery Road with Rock Hill Church Road. The site affects the new EMS facility as well as the school bus parking or the school bus garage area. Lauren, can you go to the map there? They are realigning the road to actually connect, and it doesn't show it on this one because it's a big map, but that, you see that curve there, it's leading in behind Ben Minette and will lead over and go directly to Rock Hill Church Road and make a perpendicular connection to that. The point of this is to ease congestion and facilitate mobility in this area. As you all are aware, it gets very congested. So this is the lower part of the map. You can barely see it in there. At the top left side, there's some yellow on the edge. Yes, thank you, Lauren. And then down on the very right side, there's a little tiny area of red. It's up on this edge there, yes. So the yellow area is representing a temporary easement for construction, and the red is a permanent easement. The yellow does take out a good portion of the landscaping that's required for the school bus facility. So part of the funds that are being offered are to give that back to the schools so they can replant when this project is complete. But there will be a right turn and right in and right out only at the end of Union Cemetery where it currently is today beside Ben Minette. So our EMS staff will be able to get out that way, or they will be able to come back this way and go out to Rock Hill Church Road to make a left. So the proposal from the state is for $20,975 for those easements for the temporary and permanent. I did have review this with David Thrift to make sure that the pricing seemed to be fair. He did agree with that, so if you choose to accept this, and otherwise probably will be facing condemnation anyway, but if you choose to accept this, then part of these funds need to be awarded to the schools in order to repay that and get the required landscaping back in place. So the request is for you to accept the amount offered and allow the county manager and the attorney to execute the agreements.
Kelly, I looked this over pretty good, and looks like a bunch of wires to me, everybody ought to have to admit. But then again, though, it's a pretty good sized project. But whenever they do this, is Union Cemetery Road gonna be are we gonna still be able to go through where the new EMS is going through there? Are they gonna cut that off? Or, I can't make heads or tails of it.
Well, there's multiple maps here.
Yeah.
Can't they use the microphone?
I'm just curious, because, here we are, we're
You
building
will
this
be able to go up
facility.
to there and make a right. There will not be a stoplight there. You will not be able to go left. You will only be able to go right. So when you leave there, you're going out toward Walgreens. Whereas now you can make a left and go out to 29 through the weird
Right,
intersection.
right.
So to get left, you're going to have to come back here where this little leg is that's not currently there, and you will get on the new section of Union Cemetery and follow it out to Rock Hill Church Road. Let me see if the other map is.
I mean, I understand a good portion of it. Rock Hill Church Road is going to basically go straight across 29 and go back by the QT and come out.
Correct.
Come out there at Union Cemetery.
Correct.
But my question is, I mean, the easement's no problem, but I don't want to see us block ourselves in. The sections that's there now, is that going to still be open, or are they going to somehow close that?
It's open, but we will not be able to make a left off of Cabarrus Avenue onto Union Cemetery at
Okay,
that site.
okay,
You will be able to
okay.
go right in and right out only. So if you need to get into that site, you're gonna have to go down to the
Union
new
Cem-
section
to
at
the
Rock
new
Hill Church
Union
Road
Cem-
and come back up.
Yeah, wow, okay.
At some point in the very far future, probably, we have considered looking at try to do a connection over to 601 to get a back entrance to it, but that would not be something that we're pursuing right at this minute.
Surely would be something we would want to look at, because, you know, you're putting that EMS center in the heart of the county, and access is very important. And response time is important too. If you got to go all around here to get in and get out.
Those
that
were the
could-
original conversations, that there was supposed to be one, that I don't think they're ready to commit to it, but I think they will.
Well, maybe we can
Would you like to offer more?
maybe we can reopen that discussion and see if we can't get some more clarity on what they want to do and when.
We met with the DOT out there. EMS feels confident that we will be able to have our response times the way that we need. Something for the county to consider, and it's already in our CIP plan. Obviously, the thought process behind building the EMS headquarters is it has a footprint for phase 2, which is what would happen when we go fully dynamic, which is what, you know, medic is. I think there's probably from EMS leadership, who I don't think are in the room, but as somebody who's works with them daily and is over that department, there's obviously some negatives that come with the dynamic system, because you have people sitting all day and not really being able to relax. You know, they're in, while those ambulances are comfortable, they're not that comfortable. So medic has seen some issues come with that. So I don't think that we're in a rush for dynamic. I think that we'll end up about 50% dynamic. But what you're asking about as access is, at some point, the county, we will go back as either before phase 2 or during phase 2, and we will push for an access road to 601. And the DOT will not like it. And we will actually use this as part of our discussion topics.
Do you understand what the dynamic is?
No, I don't. I'm sorry. So right now, we're based on EMS stations. You roll out to 49, you roll out to Mount Pleasant, there's actual EMS stations. If you go to larger counties, there is one large EMS station. It looks like a rental car place, literally. That is how you pull your car in, and they scan some things, and they take your drugs out, and you grab a duffel bag and go to the locker room. It's almost like a rental car place. What that means is they put the ambulances out in the busiest area based on data analytics. So like key performance indicators of where we need to have our rigs at certain times of the day, whether it be based on traffic, whether it be on call patterns in the past, or any of that historical data. That's why you see them sitting at QTs and things like that, is they're not at these stations. It's allowed Mecklenburg to shrink the number of EMS stations and create a dynamic, which I basically call a mobile system. But there's some negatives that come along with converting that all at once and putting your staff through that. So I think we'll end up with a hybrid, and I think that location is obviously why we chose to build on that, and only because I know you've been on the board during all that process. There was several of us that building that type of building on that site with that geotechnical that was there was a risk for the county. Now, the risk worked, but based on the location of it, the whole thought process was it would be perfect for dynamic. But yes, I think we will have to push a spine road out the back to 601, and it has always been the plan to do it. I can just tell you the DOT won't like it, but I think that we'll have enough documentation behind us to go ahead and make that happen.
I appreciate you explaining that to me, Kyle. because I think that's something that, whenever the time comes to reopen those conversations and go ahead and try to get that on the radar, at least for DOT.
Yes, sir. I will tell you that intersection now, which is like the Bermuda Triangle or whatever you want to call it, with every, even with, I know what you're saying is you can only turn right. Oh my God, is that delaying us? I will tell you somewhere down the road, that's going to save us paying for an ambulance or having somebody else who hit us pay for an ambulance is probably a better way to say it.
Why would you think DOT would fight us on a road?
Okay, so a couple things about that area. So you have certain distances from major intersections that you can be. And if it was from the stoplight, I think we would be fine. But I'm hoping they're not going to think it's from Walgreens back out drive that we can't have a road coming out. I think that we'll go through some negotiations with them. DOT can be pretty tricky on, when it gets into their roads, on where you can have turnout lanes and where you can, they would prefer that we didn't build that spine road until they were ready to widen 601, and we'll get there before they do. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and it will be a difficult place to do left out there, if they let us.
Right.
Oh, I don't even, I'm not
No, I don't think they will
anticipating a
let you.
left out
Yeah.
there. There's no way, yeah. You'll end up with a right only.
But the road would only be used for our EMS. Would that be correct? Or
That,
would-
the spine road I'm
Yeah.
talking about building?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not gonna be like one of these come in on it. We would
Right.
literally, there'd be a rolling gate and you would trigger a loop in the road. So say you took out of the EMS headquarters on a call, you'd trigger a loop and that rolling gate would be open before you got there and it would close behind you. And in fact, that was one of the things Todd Shanley and I had to work on, is we actually have data being pulled out into the middle of nowhere in that spot so that we have a place to get onto it when we have to go to that rolling gate. I really think we'll end up building that road before we ever end up building phase 2 to that facility.
Kelly, talk about the right-of-way again. You said that there will be a liability for the county to repay to replace the vegetation?
They are providing funds for us to
So that's
replace.
part of the purchase
That's part of the price that we have, yes. And the schools have reviewed this and are aware of it, and their staff met with Kyle and I with DOT, and so they're prepared. We discussed the bus access as well ad nauseum. So everybody's aware and understands what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and all of those details.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, thank you. Okay, we are happy to have Karen Calhoun and Laura Lipe with us to talk about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and associated budget amendments.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I want to give you a brief program update for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program that we have administered over the last 3 years from some funding that we received, 100% federal funding from U.S. Treasury, and also talk about the unwinding of that program, and we will have before you a budget amendment for approval as well. To give you an overview of some of the ERAP funding that we have administered, we received our first round of funding directly from U.S. Treasury, literally within 2 weeks of applying for it, which was kind of mind-blowing. That was back in 2020, and that was $6.5 million. We spent those funds by January 31st of 2022 in administering rent and utilities to Cabarrus County residents. Then we received funding from NC Pro. This was a state allocation. It was still U.S. Treasury funds. That was kind of a pass-through to the state, to us. That was $4.9 million. And we had to spend that funding by September 30th of 2022. And both those pots of money, a little over $11 million had to be spent by September of 2022 on the federal fiscal year. And we were able to meet that goal with both of those pots of money. And then the final allocation is where it's gotten really challenging, and that's why all the verbiage down at the bottom. The ERA 2 allocation was a little bit more challenging to kind of watch, administer, and allocate. We had until when it was sent to us and we applied for the additional amount of funding, we had until September of 2025. So we conserved those funds because we had to go through that 11+ million first and meet that deadline. So 40% of that funding was received, and that was $2,066,000, what we call a first tranche of funding. And then we had to spend 40% of that by the first quarter. And that's where things got rather challenging with trying to juggle the number of applications coming in, the payments going out. And so once we met that threshold, we were eligible to get another tranche of funding that we just received, the $503,656. So the county budgeted the full amount because, like the first round of funding, we thought we would get it in one allocation, and it didn't come down that way with this ERA2 funding. And we're now actively waiting on another tranche of funding that I just requested for the other $503,656. So what that means is if you hadn't spent a certain amount of funding, and I'll get to those slides in just a moment, Treasury wasn't going to send you the $5.1 million because they changed the rules back in June 28th of 2022 of how they were going to push these funds out. And it took us by surprise, as well as the state of North Carolina NC Pro that helped us with administering these funds as well. To give you a little bit of data, the unique households that we've assisted so far through December, 904. We've pushed out directly through the Department of Human Services, another 742 with the state funding. And then 512, we partnered with Cooperative Christian Ministries because this was quite a heavy lift. As you can imagine, through COVID, job loss, unemployment, and businesses closing down during those past 3 years, and some still struggling to recover. We've had a lot of requests coming in, and so far we've assisted 2,158 households, and that would equate to probably 4,000 plus people because a lot of these households have more family members in them with children and things like that. So there was quite a few people that we were able to impact in a positive way without being evicted and keeping their utilities on. The total amounts are there for the rent and utilities that we've administered with that breakdown. Some of the funding had a 5% administrative amount we could carve out to pay for staff. Some of it had a 10%, and then some of it had a 15%, so we had to watch that closely as well. And so the total expenditures is $12.9 million that we've pushed out in rent and utilities in Cabarrus County, and that is for Cabarrus County residents only. So U.S. Treasury issued reallocation guidance, as I mentioned, back on June 28th, impacting the availability of the ERA2 funds with incremental reductions imposed each quarter, although funds were originally available through September of 2025. Of the 40% ERA2 allocation, 40% had to be spent by the first quarter or by June 30th. Well, again, we were still spending down ERA1 and trying to meet that deadline of September 30th. And then another 60% by the second quarter, which was in the same deadline of the ERA1 funding. So just again, we were challenged with trying to spend down those ERA1 funds first, and that was close to $12 million in that first round of funding to meet those deadlines. And we thought we were okay because we were able to conserve the ERA2 funds for a longer period of time until Treasury imposed reallocation guidance and changed the rules in the middle of the game. And so just to give you an idea of how we're unwinding plan that we've outlined for the next couple of months for ending this program because the funding is winding down. We started the program back on March 17th of 2021. We've spent and reported all of the ERA1, the first round of funding, not only for the direct Treasury federal allocation we received, but also for the state allocation that we received. We're working to unwind our program, and we're looking at mid-March of this year for hopefully trying to gracefully unwind the program and end it based on the availability of funding that we have. We've given a 30-day notice to CCM, and we've already ended our contract with them, but I do want to publicly thank them for their support and collaboration with us in this program. It was completely, very valuable to us that they were able to write checks more quickly sometimes than we were. And it was a great partnership to have them help us with this program. The notice to the current ERAP staff, the ERAP program staff that we have at DHS, we provided written notice to each of those individuals January 6th to begin the reduction in force to be effective March 23rd, which is the last pay period date in that month. And we are working actively to transition those staff, if they so choose, to other available positions we have at DHS. And so the availability of the administrative funding along with the program funding will be monitored closely to sunset this program as we're moving to transition and unwind and discontinue providing the program. I will tell you several counties across the state either didn't take the funding from the state and wanted the state to administer it, or if they took it, they wanted to give it back because it was kind of a hard, challenging program to administer, especially with the way that the funding became allocated toward the end as we've started spending it down. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Karen, I just wanted to ask, you touched on it real briefly, but you, on the previous slide to that one, talking about the notice for the reduction in force, and you mentioned that you may be able to keep some of those employees to fill vacancies that we have now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we've actually already moved 2 staff over to full-time permanent positions that we had vacancies in, and we're working with the other staff to do the same if they want to stay. We had one that really just wanted to work the program and wants to sunset with the program, which is advantageous to us because we can retain her through the end of the program as we unwind.
When this is all finished, will there be some people that's working now that will not be working?
That's possible if they aren't selected for the positions. They have to go through the application process to transition over, but we are working with HR to encourage them to apply for anything they're interested in so we can try to retain them if they want to stay.
That's great. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Could you give us a little insight on, as far as the program, like eligibility, whenever all that came out? Who would be eligible for this? What were the requirements?
Sure. It was a little different than some of the other programs that we administer whenever the federal government comes about with funding for different grants and things that we administer through the Department of Human Services. A lot of times we use the federal poverty level as the indicator, whether it's 100%, 200%, sometimes 150%, sometimes 133%, just depending on the program. But this particular program was different in that it was 80% of the average median income. So higher level income working class was actually eligible for this program potentially.
I have no questions. I just want to thank you for all your hard work. You guys really stepped up to the challenge. I know this was a challenging time, and I know there's some growing pains and aches and pains, and but I really do want to thank you. You guys did a fantastic job getting this out to the folks. I heard it from other people as well, and a lot of people were very thankful that this option was there and that you guys handled it so diligently and so exponentially that I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Couple questions. You were talking about staff. How many people are we talking about?
We have
We have four remaining that have not gone through interview or selection, but they're actively applying for internal positions.
Right, so it's not like a large, I think some people might think 25 or 30 people, something like that.
And it's really 3 because one doesn't want to transition
One
over.
is
So
stay, yeah. And then the other, you threw a bunch of numbers out there, and they're brighter brains than mine. Mike could have kept up better, but you, if I interpret correctly, you guys were able to distribute all of that money and meeting all those deadlines and all those percentages and all those changing rules. So, kudos to you. You're shaking your head, yes. And that's the way I interpreted
we
it.
tried
but-
our best, yes.
But I know that was a monumental task to comply with all those timelines and especially since they changed a couple times throughout the process as well. So
Yeah. We would have liked to have had the funding through 2025, and we could have probably ended it a little more graciously than we were able to, and not be so abrupt with it because of just the shortages in the funding overall and how they changed the rules and kind of the midstream.
Right, right. Well, I think you did an excellent job with what you had to work with.
Thank
One-
you.
For sure.
One thing I would quickly add that I think is important to this conversation is what happens next. So Karen could do a much better job of me talking about it, but you have these benefits that are now expiring, food and nutrition services. Now we have the ERAP program that has kept people in their residence. Now what do they do? And I don't know if you want to add anything on that front.
Well, that's the challenge that we've got ahead of us with a lot of the maximum allotments that have been for the last 3 years in place for the food and nutrition program. Those are ending the month of February, so March, those benefits will reduce back to the original eligibility amount based on the family size. And we've got publications and robocalls going out about that to make sure constituents and recipients are aware of that. We are also making sure and try to coach and counsel them throughout this time to conserve their benefits so that they have kind of a rainy day fund on their EBT cards. Groceries are high for everyone, and we've tried to really work with educating them about this, that those benefits would eventually end and go back to the original amounts so that they would have some funding available to sustain food assistance for their families. We've reached out to our partners, CCM, who helps with food banks, and the Cornerfield Market out at the Dream Center to make sure they're aware because they may see an influx and an increase of people needing assistance. They're already seeing a little bit of that. The other part of that is we're unwinding with the public health emergency at the federal level that impacts a lot of our programs, and we'll be transitioning back to doing recertification of benefits, which could cause individuals no longer to be eligible for Medicaid, food stamps, and crisis assistance, Work First, all of those programs. And so the state is calling it a benefit cliff, and so it's going to be a challenging time for us as a department in trying to make sure that we are responsive to people. We are, and we want to continue to do that and communicate with them what is happening with their benefits, but also where our community partnerships are so strong and valuable to help make referrals to other programs. If we can't help them, we're going to try to find someone that can. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that. And then with this program unwinding, to Rodney's point, you still have people that are struggling with businesses closing or laying people off. I was on a call last week with NC Works, and she said they're still seeing a little bit of that where people are struggling because a business has closed or there's delay in shipments and supplies and things like that. You all have heard about that with all of the construction that's going on. And so that's impacting individuals' ability to work as well or to find work. And so even though there are jobs, it may not be a right fit for the individual. So we're trying to get out ahead of this as much as we can and plan accordingly so that we are responsive and can help people as much as possible.
It's been a long road, huh, Laura? Laura ran the daily program every
She
time,
did.
and she and her staff, and bringing on people who were working part-time. They weren't always as passionate about their job as they needed to be sometimes. Some were very good, some not so much. So that constant churn of employees, that constant churn of phone calls from the ones that are getting the benefits, from the cities who have utilities that are not getting paid and they're going to cut off the services, and we're trying to communicate to the cities, and they were very gracious on that as long as they knew that we were processing, they were going to get their money, they left them on. So it was a constant churn, and these two ladies and the other 30 or 40 of the others behind them deserve a tremendous amount of thanks, because it was not easy. Because you had mad people because they weren't getting their payment, and you had those mad landlords that weren't getting their payments. And so it wasn't processing the forms and everything was one thing, but then after answer hundreds of phone calls daily or weekly, it was a mess. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we move now to item 4.9 from Finance, Budget Amendment and Capital Project Ordinance, and we're happy to have Jim Howden with us for that item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Back in January, the board approved, or really they reaffirmed, the Mount Pleasant Library Active Learning Center Foil Park project, budget of $26.5 million. Currently in the capital project fund, the budget is set at $17,499,999. So asking you to approve the budget amendment and project ordinance to add additional funds of $9,001, with $8,500,001 coming from the Community Investment Fund and $500,000 coming from Part F grant from the state.
What is a Part F grant?
It's a grant associated with parks.
The Parks and Recreation Trust Fund.
Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
Okay, any other questions on this item? All right, and we move to reimbursement resolution, also from Jim.
Yeah, the motion is to adopt the reimbursement resolution for the Mount Pleasant Library Active Learning Center Foil Park project up to potentially $26.5 million. The county may advance its own funds to pay certain expenditures. If we do so for this project, we want to approve this reimbursement resolution so the county can reimburse themselves with future debt if we want to.
Any questions on this one? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to item 4.11, Stonewall Jackson Training School parcels timber harvesting plan approval.
Good evening. Several months ago, we went out for RFQ, requests for qualifications, for timber harvesting firms. I am not a timber harvesting expert. I suspect after this process, I will be. We only received one applicant, and we've decided to move forward with them. I need the board's approval to allow the county manager, of course, with legal counsel, to approve those. But I did want to just provide some information because I was unaware of how that all works. You don't think about it as you drive on the highway, but you see a lot of timber harvesting as we travel throughout the state. But I never understood what went into it. Now I know there's a reason. So obviously we have to work on egress into the Stonewall Jackson parcels. It's plural. We do not currently own them, but we are working diligently with the state. And we are asking that the state work diligently so that we do own those. And then we will have different egress points that will have to be reinforced because of the amount of trucks and, quite frankly, the sheer size of those trucks that go in. So not that any of you have walked all of Stonewall Jackson, but I know that you go out to the park and things like that. There are dirt road access that's not going to work for those type of trucks to get in. So we're going to have to reinforce some of those roads, and that's literally reinforcing them with mulch that come from the first thinning. So any part of a timber harvesting project is the first thinning. And then as you come back for the final timber sale, that's where you make your money, is on the final timber sale. So the way that it's been proposed to us by this group, and Lauren is displaying the map, is that we will pay a designed fee for putting the roads in there, advertising, making sure that everybody that is putting in bids can handle the work, all of what I would call what we hire an engineer for to do. I can tell you we need a chiller, but I can't tell you what size the chiller it needs to be and all the different pipes you need to hook up to it. We would hire an engineer for that. Well, that would be their business to make sure, set all the rates and handle all of that paperwork. And then rather than us splitting the proceeds with them, the actual split will be much less for the consultant because we will be paying them this fee up front for handling all that first portion of the first thinning and the final sale. So we did go through the proper process in terms of statute. There's not much out there to choose from. I can tell you when you put an RFQ out for design of a building, I'm getting about 20 RFQs right now, not so much for timber sales. I suspect some of that is because the site is quite challenging, if you want me to be honest with you. So the motion is to authorize the county manager to draft and execute a contract with timber harvesting consultant GFR Forestry Consultants, subject to the review by the county attorney once Cabarrus County officially owns the particular parcels identified for the harvest. And we have talked to the state, we've talked to the folks that own the tower, we've talked to everybody and made them prepared for this.
Do we have any idea as to when we will own the property? I know we have no crystal ball.
We
but-
are making phone calls weekly or monthly. Now we're starting a little advocacy efforts with our state legislators now to help push them along because we're not quite sure why they're holding it up.
Okay.
I can
There
tell
are
you on
two,
that.
there are two deeds sitting up in Raleigh right now that we drafted that haven't been signed. So we're waiting for those to be signed. Of course, those deeds have to be signed by the governor.
Right.
So there's some delay from that, I guess.
On a positive note, the historic group had responded to us with all our covenants, and our local expert on all historic covenants and provisions, Kelly, will speak to that.
So we did receive those. We looked at them and we were pleasantly surprised. They weren't as restrictive as we were honestly expecting. So that was good news. One of the holdups is the fencing that currently runs through the school property, because part of that property that's going to be transferred to us is within the fence line. And so the state had made an arrangement from a sale of a property to use those funds to move that fence. They did not get enough from the sale. So they are, last I heard, looking for funding to move that fence, but we haven't heard any more on that front either.
Yeah. But we're pushing for them to go ahead and transfer the rest of the property and leave that last historical part out there and where the fence is to the last, so we can continue on, so Kyle can go ahead and get those contracts in place, so.
For transparency from the board, since we have some new members, the historic portion that everybody drives by, all the different buildings that were built with different materials from different parts of the state, all of that stuff, those covenants, those rules that's for the developer who buys it. The county does not, Kyle does not want to have any responsibility in owning that. We very much want to sell that. So when Kelly talks about they weren't as restrictive as we had anticipated, when you meet with historic folks and you walk the property and they talk about what they want to make sure is reclaimed and kind of approached in the aesthetic approach of a rebuild or it can get a little bit scary when you start to think about that of all the types of materials they want reused and what they want it to look like, because it can be a little prohibitive to a developer. So I guess what I would say is after we read through them, we were very happy and felt that it would be a lot easier on a developer to maintain that.
And Preservation North Carolina is going to do the marketing for us to find parties that are interested in that type of work and will have the skills to do that type of work.
And so this is where I think the board can be beneficial in an advocacy role with our members of the General Assembly. If we can encourage them to budget the funds for this fence movement, that would remove a big barricade to moving forward with this project. And I think one of the items that we need to emphasize to them very strongly is the fact that as long as we've been working on this, and there have been others that have been involved as far as 30 years back trying to make something happen there, the deterioration continues, and the vandalism continues, and the trespassers, and the holes in the fence, and the people swinging from the rafters in the chapel and falling down and getting injured, and on and on. So if we can create a sense of awareness with our folks in Raleigh and encourage them to help Department of Public Safety with the funding they need to move that fence, we can actually make this happen. And there are, and I get calls very regularly from developers that are interested in that property. And some of them have been calling me on a monthly basis for 3 years. It feels like longer than 3 years now. But, so there is interest out there, and that's before Preservation North Carolina has made it available for sale or even done any sort of marketing. So I think that we have a wonderful opportunity to do something really positive to clean up an eyesore, to protect a historic relic, and to build tax base, because once private developers purchases that property goes back on the, on our tax base, which it has not been in 100 years or more. So there are a lot of real pluses to that project. Not to mention that the county has spent some money out there, not a great deal in the overall scheme of things, but in return for that, we now have title to the Franklisk Park property that we were renting from the state, and this additional property where we're talking about a public safety training facility, and all these other areas that are timbered. So when we can get all the pieces in the right places and finish this up, it's going to be a good thing for Cabarrus County, I think. Thank you both for your efforts.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions on that item? All right, we move to item 4.12, Memorandum of Agreement for the courtroom upgrades for remote proceedings. We're happy to have Todd Shanley for that item.
As you just read, the courtroom upgrade for remote proceedings has been impactful for us because during COVID, or let me rewind, when we designed the new courthouse that we're soon to open, we designed it with one courtroom in mind that would be digital proceedings. Keep in mind that we designed this courtroom pre-COVID. So during COVID, we found that remote proceedings were necessary to be able to keep everyone safe. Just cut it to that was necessary. So we also found that, and the state agreed, so they invested a lot of money into what they're calling the CRAVE system. So that CRAVE solution is an acronym that is Court Remote Audiovisual Equipment. So the ability for the judicial staff to be able to run their own court proceedings is done through this system. During COVID, the county provided that equipment. So Quentin, Kevin, Thomas, you guys have all met them. They were on the regular going to the courthouse supporting that solution. In the new courthouse, we would like to be able to implement this CRAVE solution because it is the intent of the state, the North Carolina AOC, Administrative Office of the Courts, to support this solution if they provide the equipment. So we look forward to that day. Before I submitted this, we were planning on purchasing quite a few of these systems. Judge McGee has been working with the AOC diligently to help us and improve that. So we may or may not need to actually utilize the purchasing of any systems because the AOC has agreed to install 6 of the new courtrooms. So that will reduce the funds that the county needs to supply. If you've sat through any of these presentations, Judge Heath goes around to most of the conferences and does presentations. I did one with him earlier this year. Sheriff Shaw and I are on a video promoting the CRAVE system. So we definitely believe in the solution and look forward to getting that implemented. But that will put AV into 6 out of the 10 courtrooms. And if there is a need for any other, we'll have this agreement in place in case we do actually need it. But the county is responsible for the cabling to provide that, which is just really a bare minimum. When we did that we did install one CRAVE unit in the 75 courthouse, and the cost of that was less than $5,000 to get all that cabling done. And as you can see, if you look at the back, it's quite an investment from the state to do the solution.
So am I not correct that we save significant amount of money by using that system, avoiding travel time and deputies and et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, sir. I don't want to speak for the sheriff or the chief, but I would definitely say that there is a lot of time that we spend on the road picking up inmates and bringing them in for what they call a writ, to be able to make a very quick appearance in court, a first appearance, or even just the time that it takes them to bring them across the street from the jail to be able to do that. So I think there's a lot of money that we're saving, and the state is saving, from having to have this, post-COVID, not even just as a COVID solution, but a post. So Judge McGee did set up or talk the Chief Justice into setting up a task force that I sit on in Raleigh with the AOC that has stakeholders from all of the judicial branches, and this is a real push from the Chief Justice to get this installed in every courthouse across the state.
Great, thank you. Questions, commissioners? All right, thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, we move to item 4.13. And Susie Morris has that item and the next one as well.
Yes. Good evening. What we have this evening, so there are two different requests, but I'll fill you in on the history of why we are here with these requests. So there was a court case back in 2003, and as part of that settlement, the county and the city went together and we created what is called the Central Area Land Use Plan. So it encompasses essentially the western boundary of Concord. And when that agreement was put in place, as part of that, we were supposed to look at a land use plan for this area so that use of the land would be relatively consistent, whether you were in the city or in the county. And then also there was a separate agreement, which we call the interlocal agreement, that was put into place, which says that it was initially for a period of 15 years that the city of Concord would refrain from extending utilities beyond a certain distance. So I did include that document in your packet so that you could see it. So there's an Area A and an Area B. Area B essentially is the area where the city's already had an investment and, that train had kind of left the station. So that area, they can do whatever they want at their sole discretion. Area A, essentially, kind of, if you think of it in terms of the Cabarrus Arena, north and then south of that area, kind of down to Rocky River. That's the area that we're talking about. In that area, Concord does have some utilities. So when someone is in that area with a property or maybe a house where their well is failing, this agreement allows the city and the county to come together and agree that utilities can be run to those particular properties. There has only been a handful of properties where this has happened since 2008. The agreement is about to expire in June of 2023, so we will be trying to work with Concord to put a new agreement back in place. And so in this particular case, if you're familiar with where the water tower is going out off 73, these properties are shortly after that. So the first one is along 73. It's a 5.5 acre tract, and the city has given preliminary approval of an application for utilities. So in this case, they would have to pay out of town rates, but to do a water line extension there. It's a 5.5 acre tract, but the intent is only for one single family residence. So Concord's council has given it preliminary approval. So this is a consent agenda item, so there's no public hearing that's required. But in order for Concord to be able to actually agree to making that final extension, the Board of Commissioners also has to agree to it. So we have two of those this evening. This first one is the 5.5 acre tract. Mr. McCormick owns that tract, and some of you may remember about 2 years ago, I think it was, somehow the county ended up with a 30-foot right-of-way that was supposed to be part of Evelyn Drive. So he's now at the point where he wants to try to market these properties. This particular one, it would be, it is water only. They would be using a septic system. So this first one, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer that. But again, just one single family dwelling unit. It has frontage on 73, and that is the intent, and that's what the agreement says as well that it would be for use as one single-family dwelling unit. If they tried to pursue anything else on the property, it would be back in front of the board.
Do the surrounding properties have the utilities, or how does that work? Somebody in that area wants it, but the properties next to it, I would assume, do not, or?
So there is a water line on 73, so you can ask to have utilities, but if houses were already previously developed using well and septic, more than likely then they don't have the utilities.
Would they have the opportunity to tap on if they wanted to?
They could, but based on the terms of the agreement, it would have to be maybe like their well was failing.
Okay.
Or something like that. Typically, if somebody is going to receive services from the city, they require voluntary annexation. In this case, because this agreement is in place, they do make some exceptions to that annexation piece if they can't provide water and sewer. If water and sewer were here, it would probably be a different conversation and they'd be asking them to annex. So the first one, we would just be asking for it to, it's 2101 North Carolina 73, and we would just be asking for that to be placed on your agenda as a consent agenda item.
Any questions? Okay.
Over the life of this agreement, we've only done what, we've probably done less than 10 of these, haven't we?
Right, like 10 or 12, not many at all. Because in most cases, it's larger tracts that the developers want the utilities, and they end up doing the voluntary annexation to obtain the utilities. Not many parcels are in this type of situation where utilities are available, and it's just going to be developed as one single-family residence.
We're ready for the next one.
Okay, the next one is 380 Patience Drive. Again, it's the same applicant, Mr. McCormick, and he is looking to, once again, put a single-family house there. That northern boundary is where that right-of-way was that he bought from the county not too long ago, and that would eventually allow them to open up that road to the properties in the back that currently do not have access. It's access on paper, but there's no road there, so essentially they're landlocked until that road is constructed. This one is about 1 acre, so again, just one single-family residence. And this would also be a consent agenda item because no public hearing is required.
Questions on this one? All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, next up is 4.15, Kelly Sifford, 2023-24 Community Development Programs.
So this is going to get a little convoluted because I'm going to be covering items and then we skip an item and start talking about something in relation to it. So annually, we come to you to get permission to make application for weatherization, HARP, and housing and home improvement. Those programs typically were funded. We just need to get permission from the board to apply. Those programs pretty much tell us how much money we're getting annually. So we get told how much we can apply for, and we apply for that amount. And so the only one of those that requires a match is the Housing and Home Improvement Program, which is part of the larger HCCBG, the Home Community Care Block Grant, and it's 10%. And that's the one what we typically build wheelchair ramps, do grab bars, do some small repairs on the home to keep people in their home longer. So we're requesting permission to make applications for those. We are also requesting permission to make application to any Duke or Blue Cross Blue Shield offerings, which after I wrote this, we got an application. Actually, they sent us an MOU for $50,000 with Duke, the Helping Home Fund. So that one is no match. It's private funds. So we would like to be able to pursue those as they become available throughout the year. And then finally, the regular home program. So this one will relate to item 2 down. So we have our 2020 funding that we applied for, and initially we're going to assist Concord with their downtown apartment project. Then they decided they did not want home funds in it, so we were going to build a house with Concord on property that they owned. With housing prices as high as they were, I did not have enough money in that fund to actually build a house. So I'm looking to kind of build a larger project here. So if I'm requesting to go after funding from home this year for the Grace Place project, which is formerly known as the Huddle House project that CCM is doing. The goal of that project is 16 small one-bedroom apartment or houses, very small, with a community center at the middle of it that will have the laundry, training facilities, big kitchen, the little individual units will have a small kitchen, just enough to meet kind of building code, because the idea is that they want them to come in, do the larger meals together, do trainings together, do community together. So as part of that, we've been looking at a lot of different ways to put that project together with all of the regulations that we have to meet. So we are requesting to pursue money this year that would go toward the housing units. The home art money, which we'll talk about in a minute, would also go toward that project for mostly probably the community building, just because of the way that the regulations fall out. The annual home allocation, the regular home allocation, there's a maximum cost per unit that you can put toward a building, and it usually is residential. It gets a little messy with this particular thing because we have the community building in the middle. The home art money does not have that requirement on it they've eliminated max subsidy, so it kind of works better to kind of piece this together in that way. So the request, we are going to say right now that we would need match for the home program, which is 25%. However, we are working with CCM on that because we are pledging to their project. I think they are going to probably be able to come up with that match so that we will not have to put any match into it this year, but I need to go ahead and kind of budget it and plan for that, and then if we don't need it, we can go a different direction with those funds. Does that make sense so far? It's very convoluted, I realize that.
So the home funds are the same ones that we used on the senior project that we joined with the group in Kannapolis off Little
Correct.
Texas Road?
Yes, so we have, the difference this time is we have the ARP funds. Last time we just used regular home funding, our annual home funding, and I think we put 2 years' worth of home funding into that to fund a certain amount of those apartments to keep them kind of as a lower rent. So 6 of those apartments are controlled for the next 20 years by home max rentals. So that gives, and those apartments are particularly for elderly families or individuals.
Great. Questions for Kelly?
We will need to have a public hearing if you are agreeing to proceed with the home funds this year at the meeting so that we can follow with the procedures that we need to do on that.
Great, okay. Okay, and you sort of covered 4.17, how about 4.16? Was that in?
Sorry, so I covered.
Community Development Budget Amendment.
Yes, so that one is Duke Energy rebate money. We do have 2 forms of Duke money that kind of are flowing through here from time to time. The Duke rebate money is, we do a weatherization job that is refunded by the state to us, and then they allow us to put those measures forth to Duke, and they give us a rebate. The only rule with that is that it has to go back into the program to expand the service. So that is what we've been doing for several years now, and it has absolutely saved us on heating and air for many individuals over the years. So this is simply allocating those revenues of $28,506.45 into a expenditure so that we may expend that.
Okay, any questions on that one? Okay, anything else on the home ARP contract, or did you cover all that?
Well, I think we pretty much covered it, because I was having to bounce around a little bit, but that this would be authorization of the contract. We've tentatively agreed to the project a while back, and the contract finally came through, and we had kind of been trying to work with Kannapolis, and they have not moved forward with their portion. I think that'll, whether they participate now or not, the way that the funds are falling out, I think we'll probably be okay in the grand scheme of things for the project. But 14 of the units will be for residents, 2 will be for people who live there full-time, who make sure everything's going okay, mind the property. It is next to a neighborhood who have expressed some concerns. On the other hand, we have 35 letters of support from different organizations, from schools to construction companies to nonprofits who serve these clients as well. But I did want to make sure that you were aware that there had been some concerns, and CCM has been meeting with that neighborhood in order to try to alleviate any concerns.
So do they have the zoning needed to move forward with it, or is that still pending?
I believe they do have the zoning that they need, because
Right.
they're residential units. You know, our next big step is, if you approve this, I will be moving forward with an environmental review on the property. The home ARP funds require that the county do the environmental review, which is a little different. Typically, that's done by whoever's doing the project, and they give it to us, but for this one, they are requiring that we do it. So that would be my next step, is to check that and see what layouts are available to us and things like that, to make sure that it is fully viable. I believe it is, but it's got a few hoops to jump through still.
Okay, any other questions?
Introduce.
Hmm?
I don't know if he's been up here before or not.
Robert, come on up.
New employee, or fairly, not brand new, but he's been around, but I don't think he's had
Yes.
the reason to come before you.
This is Robert Anderson. He is our community development planner. He is going to be working on a number of things. He's dealing with the home program. He's going to be taking it over, so we're doing that transition slowly, because obviously we're starting into a very complex process here with multiple grants, so I'm working with Robert on that. He's going to be working with us on weatherization, learning that, and he's working with the homeless task force on coordination. We're going to really jump in here and start working hard on the continuum of care. We have discovered it's a little bit broken, and so we hope to get that in order, so that potentially in the longer term, Cabarrus County will get more funding for our homeless population and to serve those needs.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you with us. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to item 4.18 from the Sheriff's Office, Law Enforcement Services Agreement with the Town of Harrisburg. We're happy to welcome the Chief and the Sheriff back up.
Thank you again. I think there's been quite a bit of discussion around the Harrisburg Services contract, and I would defer to Rodney on the details on it.
So the reason this is before you is, as you know, the town of Harrisburg is making a significant investment in law enforcement protection in their area that included a pretty significant tax rate increase. So as part of that, they wanted to revisit our agreement with them, and in particular, they wanted to focus it on a longer-term commitment. And so the agreement that you have in your packet is a 10-year contract. There's a lot of details in there. I won't bore you with all of them, but you've had time to review those. I think the most important shift is a focus on the actual expenses of providing these services, because for the county, the goal is not to make money, but it is to be revenue neutral, so that it's fair to the taxpayers of the county outside of Harrisburg. And so the contract that is before you will base the expenses on actual incurred, whether that's for personnel or for operating expenses. And we will bill them on a quarterly basis, as we've done in the past. There is also still in here an administrative fee, and that is to acknowledge the county's role in recruiting, hiring, technology, all of those other expenses that we incur. And so it is capped at $75,000 annually to contribute towards that. This agreement that has been negotiated with the town would be used as the template that we would move forward with in terms of the town of Midland and the town of Mount Pleasant. And so we try to align these agreements so that they're consistent across the board. And so the intention would be to take this agreement to them, negotiate it, hopefully not have to change too much, and then get it back and signed. The sheriff can speak to the operational piece of it. I think the only other item that we've had some discussion about and that is still in this agreement is historically, we have provided 2 deputies to the town of Harrisburg, Mount Pleasant, and Midland that the county pays for that are assigned to those areas. Those are still maintained in this agreement. The town made that request. We put them in there for your consideration, but we can certainly go back if there's a desire to amend that. Taking those out would require the town to either do with 2 less resources or to pay for 2 additional deputies on their behalf. So anything you want to add, Chair?
No, operationally, I'm comfortable with the contract. Over the years, we've ironed out any concerns, eliminated some hard deadlines as there's challenges in recruitment and hiring and replacement, and then you've got to prioritize that, but make sure they're getting what they're paid for. We work through a lot of that. Operationally, we're staffed really well in Harrisburg. We've been able to maintain that. So I'm very comfortable moving forward with town management and just the working relationship we've had. So I think it's a good thing.
One thing I didn't mention, so as part of the FY24 budget, what you'll see is a Harrisburg division created as part of the budget so that those expenses, those personnel are all in a separate account so that we can better manage and track.
Questions?
I'm good with
Yeah.
this, just for the general population. How many officers, you said this is adding to, is it adding 2 additionals? Or no, that was SROs, I'm sorry. But what is the total staff that you have in Harrisburg on a regular basis?
Right now, we have 22.
Okay.
Obviously, this plan carries it out with their end goal of having 30 officers in Harrisburg over that 5-year period. So they've built in their own detective positions, which we support from our CID proper. They're going to fund 2 CID officers out there as it phases through, another supervisor, additional patrol officers. So they're really looking at their growth and what they want from law enforcement services out there. So it's kind of a comprehensive plan, and I think it's where they come from with this 10-year contract is they're building something, and they want it to remain there if at all possible. But it does have an out clause for both. You know, I mean, they're reasonable, should something change or developments happen, there's an ability to get out of this as well.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood your little chart here.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Mhm.
Okay, no, I appreciate it, and again, thank you for all you do.
Yeah, I spoke to the mayor of Harrisburg earlier this morning, and she seemed happy with the contract, and some of the other town officials I had spoke with. Seems like it seems like the relationship's working out well, so, I'm happy to support this and move forward with the renewed contract, so, thank you guys for keeping us safe.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that probably I'm the one that has questioned the 2 deputies at no charge to each of these three municipalities, and I have questioned that strictly from a fairness standpoint, that we do not provide any benefits of that nature to our 2 largest municipalities, which make up a huge portion of our tax base, and that would be Concord and Kannapolis. And then also, what's the population difference between the 3 municipalities? And where's Harrisburg at right now? Do you mind know? Population-wise?
I don't know exactly what it is.
20, so they're at 20,000 in Mount Pleasant's at, I started to say 1,800. So that's the reason that I have questioned it in the past, you know, that it seems to me it should, if we are going to provide it, then it should be somewhat based on a per capita basis of the populations of those communities. So I just never have understood the rationale, and I guess it just happened that way long ago, and it's never been changed. Is that true?
I think large in part, yes, it's been an operational factors, I think, play into this more than anything, in that, you know, in growth over time has changed the landscape for some areas, not so much for others. But in the towns paying for the law enforcement services, my understanding is the original 2 additional deputies, which cover the additional shifts, were put into place through an agreement that allowed those deputies that were funded by the towns, be it Harrisburg, Mount Pleasant, or Midland, to respond to calls for service outside the incorporated town and provide either primary response or secondary response to calls for service. So if we had a car in Midland and the call was a half a mile outside of Midland on Highway 601, but our closest car was 49 at 601, the Midland car could go take that call if it was an emergency or a high priority call. Or if an officer needed backup on, say, a domestic, that officer could come from Midland, and Midland was fine with that shared response. Same thing in Harrisburg. As it grew, we had pockets of the county inside Harrisburg. There were things that were not necessarily annexed in, or they were bounced around. That is still in all the agreements to this day. So that Mount Pleasant officer that's there is eligible to respond out as far as they need to in an emergency situation. But, you know, we want them where they're supposed to be, but they do provide a valuable operational assistance from that standpoint. But that was and going back and talking with others, that was why that was put into place. Plus, you know, if you go back many, many years, a lot of these were put into place just a daytime deputy initially. Then they wanted to get one that stayed in the town 24 hours. And it was kind of negotiated at that point. So,
And the way you just explained that makes perfect sense.
So we do get some benefit. If we have an incident in the county, Harrisburg graciously sends cars. I can tell you when the shooting occurred at the Concord Mills Mall, where we had a victim, a homicide victim, multiple cars came from the town of Harrisburg to assist that. So that occurs all over the county. It's treated as that. So we do get a value out of those 2 officers, if that makes sense.
And you feel that all the municipalities understand that agreement and are comfortable with it, that they do not attempt to place any undue restrictions or requirements on you regarding the location of those officers?
We've had discussions about that. I think there was some unreasonable expectation that you could just put a percentage on it and say, okay, 75% or 85% of the time, the officers in the town. You know, where the reality is, they're in the town 100% of the time, except when they're responding to something just outside the town. It's just hard to put data on that. But we've worked through it. We've removed some of those hard numbers and there's that cooperative nature that's in all 3 of these that allow us to continue to do that now. So that was, you know, how much am I getting for my dollar type of thing. But I think through what we've been able to do operationally and show that, you know, the vast majority of the time the cars are there, but in a critical incident, they're needed, they're going to go in, and the towns are okay with that.
Right. Yeah, well, you've just solved my concerns. And I think probably I was playing some old tapes from old conversations because we have had those conversations.
Absolutely. You're
in the
absolutely
past.
right. And we have had to work through some of that.
Yeah.
And like I think too, it's just been changes that are occurring and expectations and call volumes and those types of things and the unpredictable nature of it. I can't tell you tonight that the Midland car won't respond to 9 calls outside the city of Midland.
Right.
All right, I just can't, you know, but the potential is there, and it sometimes happens. But I can also tell you, it might go 30 days, and they never leave the town.
Right.
So it's a mutually shared benefit.
Well, and as someone on the board knows, you know, the big, I say hiccup previously was vacancies. And we've made it very clear, we communicate with the Deputy County Manager Harris. We communicate with those town managers anytime there's a vacancy to give them the knowledge that there is one, and we fill those as quickly as we possibly can. I don't think we've had any lapse within the timeframes that the towns have asked for. So we've really tried to address those needs and those concerns that those town managers have had. We've personally met with all of them and spoke with them, and I think they're very pleased with the process that we currently have in place to address vacancies, and we've not had any issues, I think, since Sheriff Shaw's taken office. I think we've addressed those concerns adequately.
On that point, this agreement takes that provision out because we're going to bill them based on actual expenses. And so there's no need for them to be concerned about a vacancy because we're going to pay only what's on payroll. And so if that position is vacant, there won't be any charges for that.
Well, I think ultimately, our concern is that every single citizen in Cabarrus County receives the attention that they need, law enforcement wise. And if this accomplishes that goal, then that's a good thing.
It does.
Just 2 more other quick items. So one provision that I missed, and then just reiterating, this agreement is going to be the template we use for the Midland and Mount Pleasant agreements. And so our hope would be that we can take this agreement, share it with the town managers, make minimal changes, and then adopt this. And so I put that out there because we have had some issues in the past negotiating these agreements and wanting to change significant terms. And so we want to make sure you're comfortable with this agreement as proposed and using that as the basis of these agreements as we move forward. And then the second piece is with this specific agreement, the town is planning to deed all of the vehicles that they currently own to the county upon execution. So they no longer want to be in the car business. So they're going to give us all of their law enforcement vehicles. They will become county vehicles and subject to all of our policies, procedures, et cetera. So just want to put that out there as well.
So what about the insurance issue that we had sometime earlier this year, I think?
So it will
How's that
fall under the county's insurance, and then it has provisions in there about replacement or unexpected replacement.
Right, so the county is responsible for replacement if one of those
And then
vehicles
the
is
town will
wrecked, just
reimburse
like
us.
any other.
The town will reimburse the expense for that replacement.
Okay, so does that solve the insurance issue?
It does not for the small municipalities. So for Mount Pleasant and Midland, they will want a provision in there to insure their own vehicles.
Right, and can they do that?
Yes.
Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that should solve that problem.
Yeah.
I think moving forward, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're going to try to move each of these municipalities into their own budget eventually. So that
Correct.
the actual costs can be more easily determined, because right now you're basically filtering through our main admin budget and trying to parse out each of these officers. We're going to try to put each of those in a separate budget item so that they all have their own budgets and costs can be better managed and better articulated to the towns for those costs.
There will likely be, I could be wrong about this, but my worry is that there will likely be an expense increase for both Midland and Mount Pleasant because they are currently paying based on estimated expenditures, not actual expenditures, and I believe they get more experienced deputies typically that are at a higher cost to the county. And so my guess is when we move to this model, there may be a slight increase in their annual cost.
I just have one quick question, Rodney, on the vehicles. Once they're deeded back to us, that's our maintenance responsibility, which I understand. Is that turned around and billed as an expense to, okay.
Yeah,
That's why I
they
wanted
pay
to
for the
make sure I was
maintenance and the
clear on.
fuel for the vehicles, correct?
Perfect. That's why I want to make sure I was clear on.
So now what happens, you know, as you said, taking this contract and trying to apply it to Midland, Mount Pleasant. If a deputy who is in that area responds to a call outside of the town limits, then now how are you going to quantify that of what the town owes for reimbursement?
We do not quantify that, and so.
But with this, you will?
No. They get billed for their town deputies, regardless of where their calls are.
So what if the deputies in that town are responding outside of the town limits?
That's just part of doing business. That's part of the agreement. And then they also get the 2 deputies that are provided by the county, which should offset that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered how that would work. And I know that's not gonna happen frequently, but if there is a big event where they're all having to shift their resources to a different area of the county, then I could foresee that being an issue with a town potentially if.
Well, and the way we do that, for example, if, let's say if we've got to pull the Midland deputy up because an active shooter's going on, and we know it, that we're pulling that deputy up to the immediate crisis and we're backfilling Midland with another car, if that makes sense. Whether they're calling them in on the night of the mall shooting, we called in about 12 additional officers to backfill Midland, Mount Pleasant, and Harrisburg, because we sent all those people going, because we knew we had 1 fatality, another injured, and we didn't know where the shooter was.
Right.
And we actually had more cars, we had 16 cars on scene, more than Concord Police had on scene. So, and you can't just respond and go, okay, we're gonna leave, but we do have a plan. So that, it's not like they're sitting there without a deputy. We also have other zone cars that can pull over and cover that zone. So they're receiving the same coverage, even though that designated deputy might not be there, and because it becomes complex. Let me get, so a deputy in Midland, assigned to Midland, paid for by Midland, makes an arrest. He's leaving Midland as part of his duty, and he's gonna spend about an hour and a half driving up there, going through the process with the suspect, and then driving back, okay? He's out of Midland, so we're gonna cover that through a zone car. So it's the same thing if he now has to go to court 30 days later and wait in court for 4 or 5 hours. Yes, he's the Midland car. That's where it gets, you could never parse it out. You have to have this agreement of, we agree to allow him to respond out or her to respond out, and we agree to provide 2 at county cost, and it all comes out in the wash on the response side.
Right.
Not so much the gallons of gas, the tires, the repairs, which are easy to quantify. It's those nuances that are a little hard. I know I went on about that, but I think it helps y'all have an understanding of kind of the dynamic that's kind of shifting all the time.
Yeah, I agree it does. And, I did a ride along with one of your officers on Friday night, and I was really impressed with how, Concord and Kannapolis, police departments, worked with Sheriff's Department. We were, and we actually, to go to your point, Chairman Morris, we spent a lot of time patrolling in the city of Kannapolis and city of Concord. And whenever we made stops, one of their people was right there along with it. So it seemed like and then we actually made a stop outside of city of Concord, but one of their folks come and helped out with a problem. So it seemed like there was a lot of cooperation, and I was impressed with that.
Thank you. And you think about someone whose home's being burglarized at night on Highway 200, that Midland car oftentimes is going to be the responding officer. And so when you start looking at the benefits of having those 2 county paid for positions, it allows that Midland car to come out. So in some effect, the county taxpayer is reaping some of the reward of having that officer in Midland. And so that's kind of the way I look at it, is it's kind of a force multiplier in the sense that we're able to get people to Highway 200, to Barry Georgeville Road, those areas quicker and be more responsive with those 2 county-funded positions in addition to those town units. So the town contracts are very beneficial, not just to the towns, but also to those areas outside of those towns, but very close to the town limits. So.
Great. Any additional questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Okay, we move now to item 4.19, advertisement of delinquent taxes. Happy to have David Thrift to talk about that item.
Good evening, Commissioners. General Statute 105-369 requires that I report to you the amount of unpaid taxes for the current fiscal year that are liens on real property. So for our 2022 real property taxes that are still unpaid, we have $12,879,363.17. We subtract from those anything that is currently under bankruptcy protection, which is just $4,760.87. So the total lien on real property at $12,874,602.30. That statute also requires that upon receipt of this report, the board must order the tax collector to advertise those tax liens. I would request that that advertisement date be set for March 26th. The reason we wait until the end of March is it allows us an opportunity to send notice to all of those delinquent taxpayers. Gives them 30 days to make payment and be aware of that scheduled advertisement so we can collect those funds, hopefully keep them out of the paper. So the requested action then is just a motion to approve the report for the 2022 outstanding delinquent taxes that are a lien on real property, and to order the tax administrator to advertise these liens Sunday, March 26th. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for David?
In your experience and your history, is that pretty much what's in line with other years that we've had, or is that seem a little higher or lower? Or?
It's actually pretty consistent with where we expect to be. By the time we get to advertising, we're hoping to be at historically, we're at the 6 to 7 million range. So
okay.
We'll collect a good bit of this prior to advertising. And then, from the point of advertising through the end of the fiscal year, our collections staff is just an awesome team. And as you've seen in prior years, they're above 99%. So we expect to be very close to.
So it seems like when you send out these notices, then people start paying up.
Yeah, they don't want to be in the paper.
Okay.
We take as many measures as we can to make sure people have an opportunity to pay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 4.20, jail behavioral health services. Rodney.
I can start. So I'll start with the motion on this particular item. So it's a motion to approve the transition of behavioral health services of the jail, including 3.5 positions to the management of Cabarrus Health Alliance, and approve the, I don't think we need that part. So we can scratch the budget ordinance part. So this item is transitioning the Stepping Up program and a clinician position to the Health Alliance from the county. Just for history, so the Stepping Up program came out of a call for action from the National Association of Counties 7 or 8 years ago. As it was originally created, Daymark Recovery Services operated this program. It had 2.5 positions. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, the Stepping Up program came in-house to the county and has been operating out of the jail and overseen by a licensed clinical social worker at Human Services. It is a program intended to do reviews of medical screenings of inmates as they come in, to connect them to resources, treatment, et cetera, to try to get them on the right path. The item here will move that responsibility over to the Health Alliance. We have had some issues from a staffing perspective, especially from a clinician perspective. Competing with hospitals and other health agencies is very, very difficult, especially in this climate. And so we think they are more appropriate for managing this program moving forward. I know we have some folks in the room. Lundy can talk about the HR implications, because this would be a reduction in force of 3.5 positions on the county side. And then the Health Alliance would be creating 4.5 positions on their side to manage this program. So I don't know if you want to come up and speak to any of those conversations.
So mainly I'm just here if you have questions. I have had conversations with the impacted individuals,
and we would work with them and with CHA, assuming you approve this, to come up with a transition plan. We would look to keep them as county employees through the end of April to allow time for a transition as it pans out with each of them. And then CHA would be posting an additional position and a half to provide support. So, again, communications have been made, employees are aware, and those conversations went as well as can be expected. So if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer.
And we've talked a little bit about this from a financial perspective. We think on the high end, you're looking at probably an increase of about $150,000 annually. That's to add an additional resource to oversee the program that the Health Alliance would need, as well as the additional cost for just the staffing. We think we can get that number down slightly with some potential adjustments to contracts that exist for providing some of the clinical services. And then there is also long-term, as we're having discussions about the opioid settlement funding, there's some opportunity potentially to use some of those resources to offset some of the expenses for this particular program, because inmate services are one eligible category. So from the funding side, we're good through the end of the fiscal year. If you approve this change, we will build it into the FY24 budget so that it's in there moving forward.
Well, I would just say that I'm very much in favor of this move. I've heard the sheriff say on multiple occasions that the detention facility is the largest behavioral health facility anywhere around, and certainly I think that's one of the reasons that we were prompted to begin the Stepping Up program a number of years ago, is to try to reduce some of that recidivism, that revolving door syndrome that goes with a lot of folks that are frequent visitors to the detention facility. And I think this is enhancing that effort, and it comes at a wonderful time, as you mentioned, with the opioid settlement funds, that we have some resources to help fund that. And always, from my perspective, I always look at it as hopefully eventually being a cost savings expenditure, that it will prevent some of those folks from being in the detention facility. So I very much support this. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you. And we move now to the approval of the regular meeting agenda. And let's see, what was the one item we talked about? Number 7 on consent. Yeah, if I can get my pages turned the right way. Yeah, so that would be removing item 7 from consent agenda, which is the Rob Wallace Park timing. We've already resolved that issue. Does anyone see any other changes that we might need to make there? We do have the public hearings scheduled in there that were requested. So at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting agenda and schedule the necessary public hearing with the removal of item 7 from consent. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly on item 7, we never did really vote on that, did we?
We had consensus.
We talked about it. We had consensus.
We had consensus for Kyle to share that information with
Right.
Midland.
So we
So a
just,
vote is not required.
so we're just gonna take it off because we
Yes.
gave him consensus?
Yeah,
Okay.
The consensus to delay the bids.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I just didn't want us to consent on
Yeah.
it twice.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes unanimously. And we do have need of a closed session tonight, so at this time, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session as authorized by North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A and 3 for the discussion of pending litigation. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. That motion passes, and we are now in closed session. Thank you to everyone that joined us online tonight.
Needed for those 2 floors, so we bumped it up to the old attic and created green room, dressing rooms, and another office space. The first breakfast